While testing this indie game I've been working on, I began to realize that the gameplay needed a bit more variety. I had a bunch of upgrades you could find, but when it came to combat, it was rare for any of these upgrades to noticeably change the moment-to-moment gameplay. There's this lightning spell that you can find, but aside from that, a lot of the boss fights would probably just look like this, where you're slashing at it until you need to roll away, then you go right back in and repeat. It's not too interesting to play or to watch. A lot of games have systems in place that either force or incentivize some variety in the gameplay. I've talked about God of War a few times now, how its abilities are on cooldowns, which incentivizes the player to switch between their weapons and use their skills. Each weapon feels very different to use, and that variety makes it more fun to play. At the same time though, it's optional. You can stick to your favorite weapons, and that's perfectly fine. It may not be the most efficient option, but many players don't really care about that. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is a very popular recent game, and it creates variety in a different way. As you use your weapons, each hit consumes a bit of durability, until eventually the weapon breaks and you're forced to switch to something different. The fact that the weapons break is very important to this game's core gameplay loop. You churn through the different weapons you find, which encourages you to explore and find more. This cycle wouldn't work if the weapons lasted forever. That being said, it still feels bad to lose a weapon you really liked, and it feels bad fighting enemies knowing it's costing weapon durability. This does encourage variety though, because I'm forced to change what weapons I use, or I might want to look for something in the environment to defeat the enemies instead. I think it's possible to adapt these methods of adding variety to fit my game. First off, finding and using weapons that you find is just fun. I was halfway there when I first implemented items that you could pick up and throw. I've now added several more of these items, but they're weapons, like this spear. While you're holding it, the weapon replaces the sword as the main way to attack. Then when you're done with it, you can swap it with something else, drop it on the ground, or throw it. And that last option is what I really want players to do. Throwing weapons is satisfying, does a bunch of damage, and gives you a little bit of money. It's also currently one of the few options for attacking at a distance, so any weapon you hold immediately has that advantage. A moment ago, I used the phrase, "when you're done with it." And that's the challenge. I want to encourage players to be done with weapons after a certain point so that they switch to something new. Tears of the Kingdom does this through its durability system, and it's necessary for the weapons to break in order to enable that cycle of finding and using more weapons. It's a negative incentive though. It feels bad losing weapons. I want to try and find a positive spin on this. I'm trying out some kind of weapon charge system. Let me know if you have any good names for it. Basically, any new weapon you find is fully charged, currently as seen by this yellow bar. And each time you attack with the weapon, it will consume a bit of that charge to deal extra damage. The weapons don't break when the charges are depleted, instead the weapon degrades into a standard version, where you're missing out on that extra damage, but the weapon is still perfectly usable. At this point, the player will probably be on the lookout for a new weapon, and once they find the right opportunity, they can throw their uncharged weapon for heavy damage, get a bit of money for doing so, and pick up a fresh new weapon that's fully charged. Or if there isn't a new weapon to pick up, they can always fall back on the sword, which they'll always have as an option. As long as I'm able to create enough weapons and add them around the environment, I think this whole setup has a lot of potential. Currently, the different weapon classes I have are spears, great axes and great swords, magic staves, and the torch. To help demonstrate why I think this new weapon system works, I'm going to show off the new changes I made to an older boss. To start, I brought the lightning rod since it acts as a light source, just like the torch. I made a lot of improvements to the entire presentation of this boss. I made this new spooky cave boss music that's playing, and I really like how the eye glows in the dark. As I'm fighting, the lightning rod is doing a lot of damage, but I'm going to throw it once it runs out. The torches around the arena end up being really useful since catching the boss on fire lights it up and makes it easier to see. It doesn't take too long before the torch runs out and I have to throw it and grab another. In general, I think it's clear why I think this boss fight is more interesting than the electric boss that I showed earlier. I'd like to make similar improvements here and carry this idea forward with other bosses as well. Same as before though, I'm not confident in calling this system done. It definitely needs improvements as is, and it's also possible that it won't work as well as I currently think it does. I'm still really optimistic though, because I genuinely think the game is fun to play, and these recent weapon updates definitely make it more fun. But I really care more about what players think of it, so if you're interested, the current version is in the description, and feel free to stop by my Discord if you have any feedback or want to join the community. Thanks so much for watching.